Welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me Sri Tilak Devasher again, and he had come on our channel a couple of times, I think a couple of years ago. So we apologize for the delay. Somehow it never happened, and I decided that I'll talk to Tilak ji, and he was so wonderful. In the morning I called him and I said, can we talk about your new book on the Pashtuns? And he said, sure. And then we will also touch upon our favorite topic, Pakistan. So let's welcome our guest of the evening, Tilak Devasher ji. Tilak ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for having me again, and it's a pleasure to talk to you.
So Tilak ji, this book, The Pashtuns, A Contested History, a few weeks ago, Major General Gagandeep Bakshi came on our channel. And that was the first time I realized that there are Hindu Pathans also. And I was somehow thinking that the entire Pashtun is completely Muslim, and it is not true. And then when I was talking to you today morning, you said that up until 11th century, Pashtuns used to be either Hindus or Buddhists, and now it's a surprise that we know so little about the Pashtuns, although our itihasas have mentioned about kings and queens from these areas. So what made you take up this? I feel like you wrote this book just for people like me who don't know our history about Pashtuns.
Well, in a sense, one of the reasons that I wrote this book was that when I was a child growing up, I had a very benign image of the Pathans. For example, all of us have read Rabindranath Tagore's Kabuliwala. India's first fairness cream, Afghan snow, was named by King Zahir Shah. Then you had Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the larger than life Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a close friend of Gandhiji, and participated in the non-violent struggle for India's freedom. So all this is very benign image of the Pathan. But when I grew up, the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, the Mujahideen, the civil war, the rise to the Taliban, the violence, and I was stunned. I said, what happened to this image that I had of the Pathan and what is happening on the ground? So this made me want to write a book. But more important than that, the Pathans are very important, Pashtuns, and it is very important that the world recognizes, because they don't know, elements of Pashtun history, Pashtun culture, Pashtunwali, the way of the Pashtun, and two forces among the Pashtuns, Pashtun extremism and Pashtun nationalism, and a potential combination of the two. Incorrect prescriptions because of lack of understanding has led to insecurity and violence in the region. And this insecurity is now radiating into the region. There are refugees, there are drugs, there are open spaces where international terrorists are incubating. So it's very important for all of us to understand what is actually happening in the Pashtun areas, and then to find what is the way out or what is the solution. Because if terrorism continues, the entire region is going to be affected. No one country, and even internationally, it can go all the way to the other parts of the world also. So therefore, it's critical to understand this area.
So Tilak ji, many of our readers or viewers may not know this, that in the 1940s, I think 1946, if I'm not wrong, a referendum was actually held in the what is Pashtun-dominated area to understand or to get their opinion on whether they wanted to merge with India or with Pakistan. And this referendum was deeply flawed. Let's put it that way. Nehru goes to campaign there, but somehow something went wrong. I got all these things from reading the book Shadow of the Great Game by Narinder Singh Sarila, the last ADC to Mountbatten. Perhaps we can kind of start there. So maybe if you want to go back to 11th century, I'll leave it to you. Trace with us a little bit about the great history of the Pashtuns. And I would like you to touch upon that particular incident, how you saw the whole thing play out there.
Yeah. You see, the referendum was held in July 1947. Now, the NWFP was a problem for the Congress, for the Muslim League, as well as for the British. It was a 96% Muslim province, and therefore there was a Congress government led by Khan Saab. So for the Congress, it was extremely important because it was indicative that Congress was not only a party of the Hindus, but also of the Muslims. For the same reason, for Jinnah, to project himself as the sole spokesman of the Muslims, he needed to have a Muslim League government in the NWFP and not a 𝙒𝙬𝘂𝗍𝘑𝙬 Congress government in that region. Now, the British had a similar problem for, like the Muslim League. Mountbatten's plan of a Hindu majority India and a Muslim majority Pakistan would fall flat if the NWFP had a Congress government and supported and was opposed to the two-nation theory and the partition. So, elections were held in 1946 on the issue of India versus Pakistan, and the Congress 𝙒𝙬𝘂𝗍𝘑𝙬 government won hands down. The Muslim League propaganda of Islam in danger didn't cut any ice at all. In fact, the British were very upset. Lord Ismay, who was Mountbatten's chief of staff, he called it a bastard situation, that a majority Muslim provinces had voted for a Congress government. Now, as per the partition plan, all the provincial assemblies were supposed to vote on whether they would accede to India or accede to Pakistan. The British knew that if this question was given to the NWFP assembly with the Congress majority, they would vote for accession to India, and the whole partition plan would fall flat. So they devised a special scheme that even though elections were held in 46, in 47 they said they will hold a referendum, the choice between India and Pakistan. And unfortunately, I think for whatever reason, I mean, this is a whole program in itself, the Congress accepted this, that they will have a referendum even though elections had to return a Congress 𝙒𝙬𝘂𝗍𝘑𝙬 government. This was not acceptable to Abdul Wali Khan and his brother Khan Sahib, who was the chief minister. They said, okay, if you're going to have a referendum, we'll participate, but there must be the third option of Pashtunistan, unifying all the Pashtun areas in Pakistan with autonomy. This the British opposed. And Mountbatten said that if you don't accept this, I'm going to resign. So when their demand was not accepted, the Khan brothers boycotted it, and then the result was a foregone conclusion. So that is where there is and that's when Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan told Gandhiji that you have thrown us to the wolves, that you have let us down, and we supported you for the last 20 years in the freedom struggle, and when it came to actual getting freedom, you have thrown us to the wolves. So that's a very unfortunate and a tragic part of Indian history that this particular thing happened in NWFP at the time of partition.
Yes, indeed. And, these are all glimpses of what should have happened or could have happened in a different way. Now, again, when the plebiscite across India happened, even in the provinces of Madras and Bombay and other places, there was a referendum held whether the Muslims wanted to stay in India or they wanted to go to Pakistan. The franchise was not available for everyone, wasn't it? Who got to vote in these things?
For example, in the NWFP, out of a population of 3.5 million, only 500,000 people had the vote. There was some property restriction. But a referendum was not held in other parts of India. There were the assemblies, the elected assemblies, who voted on whether they want to accede to India or to Pakistan. NWFP and I think the district of Sylhet, these are the two places where a referendum was held.
I see.
Other
Okay, this is
places
something that I heard from somebody else, so I should be wrong. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Yeah.
So the referendum, this is a special case in NWFP because the British did not want NWFP to not be a part of Pakistan. Then the whole partition plan would have fallen flat. That you have a Muslim, 96% Muslim majority province aligned to the Congress, which is, they say, the Hindu majority. For the British are very clear. The partition was between Muslims and Hindus. They could not accept that you had a province here who did not want the Muslim League, who did not believe in the two-nation theory, who did not want partition of India. They just couldn't comprehend that.
Very sorry, sir. Very, very sad. I mean, I guess people could have said, well, you would have had East India and West India, just like West Pakistan and East Pakistan, if something like that had played out. But
Yes.
even the Kingdom of Kalat wanted to merge with India. Even that India hashed.
Yes. You see, even in the case of, both in the case of Kalat and in the case of NWFP, the imperial chiefs of staff took, after seeing the partition, there's a minute which is recorded in Sarila's book, when they said that the most important part of the continent is Pakistan and all our strategic requirements will be met by Pakistan. Once they came to that conclusion, the British ensured that they would strengthen Pakistan. Therefore, NWFP referendum to make sure it came to Pakistan. They forced told Jinnah that you force the accession of Kalat, because without Kalat, a huge chunk of territory, Jinnah and Mountbatten had agreed to Kalat's independence. As I mentioned in my Balochistan book, and in August, they had signed a declaration or an agreement with the Khan of Kalat,
right,
that Kalat would be independent. In October onward, from October onwards, Jinnah started pressing Kalat to accede, because of the British told him that you must get Kalat to be part of Pakistan and not an independent country. Because they felt, both against the Soviet Union and to protect the wells of power, that is the Middle East, Pakistan will be of critical requirement. Therefore, they started then, and they have continued trying to strengthen and work in favor of Pakistan.
There are so many stories in that book. Sarilas is a real treasure trove, and I've only touched upon a few. So let's get back to our main topic, which is the Pashtuns. Walk us back in time. The Pashtunistan area comprised of Gandhara. Was that true? Gandhara was part of that?
Gandhara is Peshawar, modern day Peshawar. You see, Pashtunistan is historically stretched from the Indus to the Hindu Kush. And Ahmad Shah Durrani, who set up the empire, the first, called the father of Afghanistan, had this huge territory from Indus right up to the Hindu Kush. After he passed away, his successors could not hold on to that territory. And the first big dent in the Pashtun territory was made by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, when he crossed the Indus in 1823 and subsequently took over Peshawar right up to the Khyber Pass. So that broke away the winter capital of the Afghan kings. The Sadhuzais were ruling the Durrani branch, Sadhuzai branch of the Durranis. So a large chunk of territory was broken away from the Pashtun kings. This was then, when the British defeated Ranjit Singh in 1849, they took over this territory. And then in 1876 first, 1879, by the Treaty of Gandamak, they took over large tracts in northern Balochistan. And then in 1893 was this controversial Durand line, which initially demarcated spheres of influence. Not international borders, but just spheres of influence. The British were very categorical that this only demarcates spheres of influence. But again, by 1947, when they needed to strengthen Pakistan, the spheres of influence got converted into an international border. And Pakistan inherited that. So Pakistan says this is an international border. No Afghan government, repeat, no Afghan government, including the Taliban, have accepted the Durand line as the Indo-Afghan frontier. They said this border is undemarcated. It is yet to be settled. It's an unresolved issue because it divides brothers. And if I may add just one more point, in 1849, there was a Loya Jirga held in Afghanistan, which rescinded all treaties with the British. The 1879 Treaty of Gandamak, the 1893 Durand Line, the 1901, the 1905, and the 1921 Treaty of the Indo-Afghan frontier. So, according to the Afghans, there is no border with Afghanistan that has been demarcated. The issue still has to be resolved. And every Afghan government has taken that stand, whether it was the Zahir Shah's time, whether it was the PDPA, whether it was Dawood, the Taliban, Karzai, Ghani, and again the Taliban again. They said this is not a resolved issue and we cannot accept the Durand line.
Now, let's take a look at modern-day Pakistan. The modern-day Pakistan has a fair amount of Pashtun soldiers, army, perhaps even all the way up to the rank of general. After all, Ayub Khan, I think, was a Pashto. If there is more simmering, right now there is a lot of action happening along the Durand line on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and every day Pakistan is suffering casualties there. How do you think the Pakistani army is going to react if this starts escalating from what it is now to a slightly bigger size?
That's a very good question, and there is no clear-cut answer. That how the Pashtuns are going to actually behave. You see, there are 3 or 4 actors in this whole game. There is the Afghan Taliban, who took over power back in August 2021. There are the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is in Pakistan and fighting for their own independence and imposition of Sharia in the Pakistani portion of the what was called erstwhile FATA. We have the Pakistan Tahaffuz movement, which is a civil rights movement to defend the rights of the Pashtuns because they don't want to be treated as cannon fodder or to be set out for terrorist activities and for the foreign policy goals of the Pakistan army. Then there are the mainstream Pashtun political parties within what is now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, who are fighting for, taking part in elections and fighting for seat share and to form the government. Then you have, as you mentioned, the army, soldiers who are in the army who are well integrated into Pakistan. So in Pakistan, it has been described there are three kinds of Pashtuns. There are the Islamists, there are the statists, and there are the nationalists. Now, these are not fixed categories, they keep changing. At the time of partition, for example, the nationalists would have been in a larger number. After the Soviet invasion, the Islamists have become more popular. Like these Jamaat Ulema Islam, Fazlur Rahman, and other groups like him. The statists have remained more or less the same, who don't want any change with the Durand line. Now, it all depends on how Pakistan deals with their own Pashtuns, especially with the TTP and the PTM, and how they deal with the Afghan Taliban. If they don't handle it properly, and if they try and curb down on them like they did in the case of Bangladesh, then you will have one kind of scenario. As somebody said, that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And this is what Pakistan army believes in, smashing everything. Now, that'll with the Pashtuns, it's very difficult because Pashtuns have long memories. As one Pashtun said, he took revenge after 100 years and he took it too quickly. And Pashtuns, they don't forget, they don't forget the wrongs that have been done. And Pakistan has done tremendous amount of wrongs in the Pashtun areas. So sometimes or the other, the reaction will come. Pashtuns today are weak. They are not. But if you ask any self-respecting Pashtun where the border should be, he said the border should be at Attak, at the Indus. Afghanistan and Hindustan, where is Pakistan? So I think Pakistan is worried. Therefore, every Afghan government, including the Taliban, they keep asking them to recognize the Durand line as an international border, and no Afghan government is willing to do that. If Pakistan as a stronger country was sure of its border, why would it even bother to ask a weaker country to recognize the border? This is the border I've laid down, whether you like it or not. But they have asked each and every Afghan government to accept the Durand line as an international border because they know that there is a weakness in their formulation of being an international border.
Well, we hope that this thing gets resolved. I don't know when and how. Last question on this before we go to the next topic, which is the 𝙒𝙬 status as of today. Tilakji, up until the Americans were in occupation of Afghanistan, they were basically paying the salaries, the administration, the army, and so on and so forth. Today, who is footing the bill in Afghanistan?
You see, I think you need to make a distinction between regular armies and militias like the Taliban. In Afghanistan's history, I don't think any Afghan army has really won the wars. It's always been tribal militias that fought against the British and defeated them, fought against the Soviets, defeated them, and fought against the United States and defeated them. Now, the militias are rooted in the people, right? So they don't need to be formally paid salaries. Despite this, the Taliban have been paying their militia people who are members of the Taliban some sort of a allowance, subsistence allowance, but not like the way the Americans were paying. Regular salaries and all kinds of things. So it is more of a militia rooted on the ground with certain amount of funds being made available for whatever the Taliban are able to get out of exports, get out of trade, and other, through extortion, through sale of providing security for drugs and so on and so forth. So, you have to distinguish between a militia and a regular army.
One of the reasons given for the exit by America was the feeling that they were paying $5 billion in salaries every month. Maybe it was high, I don't know. But they said that, this is an unending war. They were in 2001, America got into Afghanistan, and 2021, 20 years, what have we got to show for it? And these are all some of the things that kind of went through.
So as I mentioned in my book, the Americans did not have a clear-cut idea what they were doing in Afghanistan.
Yes.
If you see that Washington Post, expose, the generals saying we didn't know, we had no idea what we were doing in Afghanistan. Are you there only for Al-Qaeda? Are you there to attack the Taliban to make sure they don't come back again? Are you training the Afghan army? Are you doing reconstruction work? Are you rebuilding Afghanistan? There was no clarity. There was no long-term plan. Instead of a 20-year plan, there were 1-year plans, and then military leaders kept getting changes, administrations changed. So I think there was a lot of confusion in the American, which is surprising because they had the best intelligence. They knew everything that was going on in Afghanistan. They couldn't formulate let me say they had enough maximum information. They couldn't formulate this into intelligence and into a policy which would help them win the war. How do you win? How do you define victory in Afghanistan? In fact, the moniker that Afghanistan has is the graveyard of empires, simply because all invaders have found that you cannot defeat the Pashtuns because they have no concept of defeat in the classical sense. They know only survival. They know when to talk, when to run and hide, and when to fight, but as per Afghan time. The famous dictum that you may have the time, but we have the watches. So Afghan time concept is very different. So, that's the reason. That's the reason why the Americans found themselves floundering because of not having. And then, I think the lack of cultural understanding, understanding Pashtun Wali, understanding the genealogical table, which tribe matters where, they didn't know. So that's just one of the major factors.
Last question around that area, Panchsheel Valley. How are things now?
You see, the reports which are coming out are very scattered, very few. There is some activity what's called the National Resistance Front. I don't know if it is of any serious consequence. It will take time for any resistance to build up. It took the Taliban 20 years to get back. And, the other people, Taliban have been in power now just for a year and a half now. So any resistance, the resistance will come simply because the Taliban system of governance has excluded everybody else. And their treatment of women, there are no Hazaras, Tajiks, or Uzbeks, maybe as symbolic representative. So militarily, you capture Afghanistan and don't have an inclusive government. It's a recipe for inviting resistance. Now, it all depends on how strong the resistance is, how long it will take for them to come back into power, and how long will it take for the people themselves to rise up in revolt against the Taliban. But it is not a good situation for peace and stability in the long term.
Yes, indeed. And it's been like that for a long time, so I think we can't do much about it. Let's take a look at what is happening in Pakistan post the floods. Tilakji, you had put out this doctrine of WEEP, water, I think, education, economy, and population. And in all these things, Pakistan has a very dangerous combination. Education, I'm hearing, is 65 to 70% of the population is less than fifth grade education. Population is growing at an alarming rate, and then water resources are being depleted at an alarming rate. And there is really no economy. There's no formal economy. It appears to be only informal economy. So kind of walk us through it for about 10 minutes, sir, and then we can throw open for questions.
Yeah, you see, I think for me the most dangerous situation is water. Because as per the studies conducted by Pakistan's own reputable institutions, Pakistan is going to fall below the threshold of 500 cubic meters per capita per annum by 2025, maybe 26, maybe by 27. Now, this means drought-like conditions in parts of the country. Now, many people have floated plans, people who think about these issues in Pakistan, on how Pakistan needs to augment its water supplies, whether it is through drip irrigation, whether it is through lining of canals, whether it is for building more reservoirs to store water in the surplus months. But all this requires huge capital expenditure. And Pakistan is not willing to spend any money on water because most of the money goes into debt servicing and in servicing the army. They just have no surplus funds to invest in water. Now, the problem is that for a politician, attention span is 2, 3, 4 years. He's not willing to spend that kind of a thing. He would rather have more developmental things which can attract his constituency. But water is something which neither nuclear weapons nor China nor can anyone come and bail out Pakistan. Now, these floods were an aberration because this kind of environmental disaster doesn't happen every year. Maybe it's once a decade, once in 20 years. It could still have made some headway if Pakistan had enough built storage capacity where this water could have been stored. But this water has all flown into the sea. Pakistan only has two major storage facilities, which is the Tarbela Dam and the Mangla Dam, and the third is Chashma Barrage. Even Mangla and Tarbela, because of silting, have lost almost 50% of their capacity. So where do you store the water? Today, it has been estimated that the entire, sort of just to explain it, the entire flow of the Chenab goes out into the sea, into the 4 peak monsoon months, and rest of the time the Indus doesn't even reach the sea, and there is a lot of seawater intrusion because they have not been able to store water in the surplus months. So this is a very alarming situation, and now agriculture is being affected. Pakistan is going to have to import wheat. It has the largest irrigation network in the world, and yet it has to import wheat now because it's not been able to manage its water resources. You take education, you mentioned 50% of children don't go to primary school. And those who do, you mentioned there's a large dropout rate of both boys and girls before they reach class 5. In the labor force, 60% of the labor force is either uneducated, illiterate, or below 5. Now, in an increasingly technological and globalized world, how is Pakistan going to survive? Similarly, the economy, you hear dire stories every day. It's going to default now, it's going to default tomorrow. It has to pay something like $33 billion repay next year. Its reserves are about 6.7 billion, of which half are money lent by Saudi Arabia and by China. Exports are declining. So, it's in a dire economic situation. Population is growing at 2.4%. Soon, yes. Pakistan, by 2050, will be a country of 350 million people. And you can't look after 220 million. How are you going to manage 350 million? So these are long-term issues, which I have called the weak factors. But if you look at Pakistan for the last 2 years, the whole attention is on Imran Khan, on politics, on no confidence motion, dissolving assemblies, and who's doing what. Nobody is focusing capital or time on these fundamental issues which are sinews of power, the non-traditional security of any country. So it's an alarming situation. They should have been in the disaster. They should be in the disaster management mode because it is a looming disaster in the next 4 or 5 years. A combination of all these factors.
Tilakji, much of the problem can be laid at the doorstep of how the 1947 partition played out. Did Jinnah even do the homework that if most of the Hindus were to return to India, that his administrative setup of what ended up becoming West Pakistan would be completely broken down because the administration was being run by Hindus. The landowners were mostly Hindus.
He had no idea. In fact, Mountbatten warned him that you have done no preparation work, you will be in for a shock when you get into Pakistan and start governing it. But Jinnah sort of didn't want to believe. In fact, Jinnah thought that India and Pakistan will be partitioned, but Punjab will not be partitioned. And then the people, the Hindus and Sikhs said, your basis of your partition is religion. How do you expect us to stay? So almost to a man, the Hindus and Sikhs left Punjab. And you're right, the administrative structure just collapsed. Because the incoming people who were coming from India, a lot of them did not know. Because they were, this was a new area for them. Coming from UP and coming from Bihar, they did not know this area. So Jinnah had absolutely no idea. In fact, the famous story is that when he was recuperating in Ziyarat, and Liaquat Ali, the Prime Minister, went to see him and he came out and he said, now he tells me that creation of Pakistan was the biggest mistake of his life. It was then that Jinnah realized what he had done because they had done no preparation at all. And in his speeches, he had no written document, nothing, that how Pakistan is going to actually be governed. So it was in retrospect not thought through at all. Sri, can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I accidentally got myself out. I was able to hear you, and I was wondering why you are not able to hear me. So right now my video is frozen, and I'll just give me 1 second. I'll fix this thing. 1 sec.
In the meantime, let me show my book, which we talked about earlier. Maybe some of your viewers can.
Yes.
The Pashtuns, A Contested History by HarperCollins. So,
and is it available in Amazon? I think I saw it on Amazon.
It's available in Amazon.
Yeah, we have put a link in the description, viewers. So you can, in this video, there's a description, there's a link to get your book also, sir. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I was saying was there is a link in this description section of this video where the
Okay.
viewers can go and buy it. Again, my video seems to have frozen.
Frozen, yeah.
You're-
But I can hear
yeah.
you. I can hear you.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. This should be fixed in no time at all. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm
Yes,
back.
you're back.
Let's.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry about that. Let's take questions now.
Sure.
Hardik the Great asked Tilak, is the violence in Pashtun areas in Pakistan supported by America like Baloch movement?
The Pashtuns are averse to any outside support and foreign interference. They are quite capable of managing their own affairs, especially when it comes to attacks and in violence. So I don't think so. The Pashtuns really need the TTP or anybody else. This whole area is awash with weapons. The Americans have left behind so many weapons in Afghanistan, which are gradually trickling their way down into the Pashtun areas and also into Karachi. So I don't think the Pashtuns require it. You mentioned supported by America like the Baloch movement. Again, I don't think so. The Baloch require any
I don't
kind
think so
of
either.
Yeah, they don't require any support. I mean, you can't teach the Baloch how to fight. And again, as I mentioned, the weapons are available all over the place. So this area is flush with weapons.
Next question from Nagarajan Srinivasan. Is Raj Kapoor belonging to Hindu Pathan since they are also from Peshawar?
Yes, they are from Peshawar. His house, I think, is being preserved. And they're one of the, like Dilip Kumar. Of course, Madhubala was the other famous actor with Pashtun ancestry. But the Kapoor certainly.
Next question, please. Oh, there's also Shivdasani, of course, he's from Sindh. Hari Shivdasani, who is also a fairly well-known actor. Maybe you don't remember him, but you know his granddaughters. What's the name? The two, Babita and her daughters. They are all Sindh origin. Sindhis. Yeah. Kareena Kapoor and I don't remember the other Kapoor.
I'm not too much of a movie buff, so.
Giri Srinivasan wants to know how India will handle Pakistan. If there is a disaster, we may say immigrants legal or illegal like in Bangladesh.
Now, this is a serious concern. For example, I keep talking about that in case the water situation deteriorates and you have a large number of water refugees coming in from Sindh and southern Punjab and start marching towards Rajasthan and Gujarat, it will pose an issue for India in terms of water. Of course, the Pakistan army will try and push the refugees towards the cities of Pakistan, but this is one area which I think we need to be concerned about. Now, how will India handle Pakistan? I think we can leave the Pakistanis to handle themselves and create even a bigger mess for themselves. We don't need to do anything. The way they are handling themselves, it's amazing when you look at Pakistan and study Pakistan as I do closely, the lack of serious attention to the problem, even floods. As on date, there are 30 lakh people who are living outdoors because of the floods. You hear nothing in the Pakistan media on how they are being provided relief. Reconstruction will come much later. It is a huge effort. But even provision of relief, as some people very cynically said, because they are Baloch and Sindhis, therefore the Pakistan government is not worried. If they were Punjabis, it would be a different matter. But the fact of the matter, there is no concern in the media also. No, there's hardly any media reportage on how these people are being managed. 30 lakh people on the road, sitting under the open skies. And now with winter, you can imagine their plight. So we can expect that Pakistan will, run itself to the ground. So we don't need to do anything. We need to just make sure that our own parameters are good and secure.
Sir, going back to water, before we take the next question, we were talking about this before going online, that the seawater has come up Sindh close to 100 kilometers. Did I hear you right, sir?
Yes. The two districts of Sindh and Badin are almost wiped out from the map because all the water is saline. Agriculture has stopped. People have migrated into Hyderabad, into Karachi and Sakkar and other places like that because the river is not being able to push the sea out. Indus now does not reach the sea in the 8 summer months. It's only during the monsoon period that below Kotri, the Sindh, the Indus River is able to meet the sea. Otherwise, it's the sea which is coming in. So the mangrove
Tilakji,
forest, the
yeah,
very
yeah.
precious mangrove forest, a lot of them have been destroyed.
Tilakji, when the land turns saline, you have to put tons of alkaline stuff to restore that thing back. I mean, India, I mean, in Andhra Pradesh, there was a serious, what I would call a tsunami-like situation in 1977 in a place called Avanigadda. The water came up to 10 feet inside, and people were, if you had a two-storied house, you survived. Otherwise, you just got washed away. It was that bad. 20,000 people died. People don't know this, but it took years for India to bring back normal cultivation there, because they had to keep on seeding alkaline material into the sand, test the acidity, find out if they could cultivate at all. It's a major effort, and they need to be starting today on doing that, plus build sand dikes so that the sea doesn't come in. Sea wall has to be built. So these are serious problems, and you're saying that even the two dams, they're not desilting. I
Yeah.
mean, this is like, you're throwing away precious water.
Yes. So, and they only have two major storage facilities, the Tarbela and the Mangla Dam. They have not been able to build more dams to store water in the monsoon periods to be used during the lean season. And you can imagine, and Pakistan just doesn't have the resources to do alkaline seeding to recover the land.
Right.
It's
I
just, you've
mean,
just lost that, I don't know how many thousands of
yeah.
hectares of land it is.
Tilakji, that's a multi-pronged effort. Like I said, you have to build a seawall first to prevent water from coming in. Then somehow you have to create the water to go out only from the river into the sea. The second thing is then you start working, because unless you stop that, you can't start, alkalining the land. It's a major effort. And I don't see any IMF proposal also by Pakistan to try and help that part out. This is really serious. Anyway, let's next take the next question, please. Chaitanya Takli wants to know, did Pashtuns really want Taliban? I mean, a major part of Taliban is Pashtuns, guy. Go ahead, sir.
So, it's not that the Pashtuns wanted Taliban. See, you must understand how the Taliban came into prominence. They were a small localized force, but they came against a backdrop of a horrendous civil war that was taking place in Afghanistan after the Soviet army left. The Mujahideen could not unite to rule Afghanistan. So you had Rabbani and Masood in Kabul. You had Hekmatyar in another place, and he was rocketing away Kabul. In Kandahar, there were three commanders who were fighting with each other, and they were looting and killing people and raping boys and women, stealing. So there was a tremendous sense of lawlessness, and people just wanted any force who would provide peace and security. It was in that context that they turned to Mullah Omar as a small force which first tried to secure the area, the Western Highway, into Kandahar. And from there, they gradually spread. And then Pakistan realized that, hey, this is a force that can help us. So they started supporting them. And then what the Taliban did, see, largely a Pashtun force. Pashtuns ruled Afghanistan from 1747 right up to the time of the Mujahideen, 230 years or so. And suddenly they found that Tajiks were in power in Kabul. So there was this upsurge of Pashtun sentiment for any Pashtun force that could help them regain Kabul and re-establish Pashtun supremacy in Afghanistan. And that's how initially the Taliban were welcomed by the Pashtuns. Till the Pashtuns realized what kind of a people they were. These the Pashtuns are Deobandis, but had a strong infusion of Sufi culture. Visiting graves, having urs, wearing taviz, interceding with Sufi saints that will intercede with God to fulfill their, requirements. But then when they became more and more extreme Deobandis with Wahhabi influence them, then Taliban realized that, hey, what is this going on? So it's very important to understand that not all Pashtuns are Taliban. The Talibans are largely a Pashtun force, but not all Pashtuns are Taliban. But they don't have an alternative at the moment. What do they do?
Yes, indeed. Next question, please. Does ISIS Khorasan have anything to do with the Iran's Khorasan province? Are they majorly Sunni?
Iran's Khorasan province.
I think he meant Afghanistan, right? Khorasan is in Afghanistan, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what it probably meant was the IS in Syria and Iraq. We was talking
Right,
about
right.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
they set up the Islamic State Khorasan province, headquartered in Afghanistan, in 2015, and some disgruntled Taliban joined it, and it has been growing in strength quietly, and it is bitterly opposed to the Taliban and vice versa. It was thought that once the Taliban came into power, they will be able to wipe out the ISKP. They have not been able to do it. And the ISKP, many of the attacks that have been taken place in Afghanistan, the suicide attacks after 2021, have been done by the ISKP. Now, you see, the difference between the ISKP and Taliban is that the ISKP believes in pan-Islamism. They believe in global jihad. Whereas the Taliban are a nationalist force, they feel that their boundaries are Afghanistan. So the ISKP calls the Taliban as not a regular Islamic force because they believe in nationalism rather than a pan-Islamic ummah. Then the ISKP is Wahhabi Salafi influence, whereas the Taliban are Deobandi with a smattering of Wahhabi influence. So there are both ideological and territorial differences between the two.
As of today, I think India still has not recognized the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Yet there seem to be some friendly overtures. At least India has given them wheat, things like biscuits and things like that. Where do things stand between the current Taliban regime and India, sir?
You see, again, no country has recognized Taliban. No country is likely to recognize Taliban for several reasons. And India will also not break the international consensus in that regard. Pakistan also hasn't. But we have, historical, centuries-old civilizational links with the people of Afghanistan, especially the Pashtuns. And when you see them suffering, we sent COVID vaccines. We've sent 50,000 tons a week. So where the people-to-people contact are, and India enjoys tremendous goodwill among the Afghans, especially among the Pashtuns. So India's opened what's called a technical mission to ensure that the food aid that is received is distributed all over the place and can be managed and whatever other humanitarian needs that the Afghans may have. So it is not bolstering the Taliban. The Taliban are very keen that India restart infrastructure projects, which we were doing earlier, and come back, and they were sure they will provide security. Mullah Yaqub has also said that they will send Afghan soldiers and officers to train in India, much to the dismay of Pakistan. But I think India is keeping its powder dry, like the rest of the world, to see, because being a democracy, you cannot have 50% of the population, the women, the way they are being treated. Girls' education, not being allowed to work, and that kind of a thing. So those are the issues that Taliban will have to resolve. But we will keep our relationship with the Afghan people and give them whatever humanitarian assistance that they may need.
Next question from Mr. Lee. What percentage of the economy of Afghanistan under the Taliban derives from opium sales?
Again, there is very difficult to determine. There are scattered pieces of information. The United Nations Office of Drugs, they come up with some information. But obviously, when the Taliban were in opposition in the insurgency, a substantial portion of their revenue came from providing protection. The Taliban themselves are opposed to drugs. They will not tolerate any of their people consuming this drug, but they know that it's a very profitable line of business. And if the international community is not bailing them out financially, their funds are frozen in the US, so they will turn the other way and make money. But I can't give you a specific figure of how much percentage of the economy is derived from opium figures, but it is substantial.
And just give me, okay, there's one more question that I have, but let's go to this one. Sri G wants to know, why were Northern Alliance headed by Dr. Abdullah Abdullah not given a chance to participate in the Afghan current ruling coalition?
Because the Taliban won Kabul militarily, it was not sitting over the negotiating table and deciding what will rule. And the Taliban don't believe in sharing power. They don't believe in the constitution. They don't believe in elections. They don't believe in participative democracy. So where is the question of incorporating the Northern Alliance? See, now you ask the Taliban, and being the devil's advocate, the Taliban turned around and tell the Afghan government and the Northern Alliance that in 2001, when the Taliban were defeated, they were not made part of the Bonn process. They were not included in the interim government. When they agreed to surrender their weapons and come into the mainstream, renounce politics, the Americans in their hubris said nothing of the sort. So they were pushed into Pakistan and they were forced to take up weapons and take up arms and start the insurgency. Now today they say it's very rich. You didn't include us then. How come you're asking us to include the Northern Alliance today? So that's why I said earlier, because it's a military victory, it is inherently unstable.
Next question. There is one question here that's okay. Pakistan youth are indoctrinated against Bharat, its values and ethos right from their school days. To what extent is this case prevalent in the Pashtuns mindset also?
A very good question. This is largely happening in Punjab. The textbooks in Punjab and studies that have been carried out about government schools show that the hatred for Hindus, Jews, and Christians is inculcated in the government school curriculum. It is less so among the Baloch, the Sindhis, and the Pashtuns. It is still there, not to the same extent as it is there in Punjab. Because, these Pashtun, Baloch, and Sindhis have had a history of tolerance, have had a history where they have lived together with Hindus for generations. And even in the 1947 partition riots, barring a few places, most of the violence was confined to Punjab. And at the till the time Akbar Bukti, for example, was there in Balochistan, he had a large Hindu village who was staying just next to his house. In Kalat, in Quetta, there were no Hindu-Muslim riots. Similarly, in the Pashtun, so long as the 𝙒𝙬𝘂𝗿𝘂𝘀 guards were there, they protected the Hindus. But it was in Punjab. So the school curriculum and textbooks in Punjab are the ones that these values and ethos against Hindus, Jews, and Christians is mostly in Punjab.
Tilakji, my question before we go to the next question. Mia Me Too has been sanctioned by the United Kingdom government, and it is expected that the same thing will happen from the United States also. Certainly, some organizations are hard at work. On the ground, how is this going to change the situation? Is the forced conversion of minorities going to take stop now?
No, it doesn't. Sanctioning Mia Me Too, not that he travels to the United Nations every year. He's not traveling. As it were. Yes, it is a symbolic gesture that the international community has taken note of forced conversions. There are 1,000 minor girls being converted every year.
Yes.
Hindus largely, then also Christians and also Sikh. And
Yes.
largely in Sindh, where there is a
Yes.
PPP government which is supposedly friendly towards the minorities and the Hindus. And this is going on under their very nose. The police does nothing about it. The Sindh Assembly did pass a bill against forced conversion, but under pressure from the religious parties, they've withdrawn
They
it.
didn't sign it. Yeah, they didn't sign it. The governor didn't sign it. I've had a session completely devoted to that. See, the sadness here is Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's mother was a Hindu.
Yes.
And this guy wanted to establish his Muslim credentials so much that he went to the other extreme. I mean, what madness. Yeah, go ahead.
In my second book, Pakistan at the Helm, I've talked about this at some length. He was in a lot of inferiority complex and very complex because his mother was a Hindu. And he used to mistreat her. So at one time, Lakhibai, or Khurshid as she was called, actually cursed Bhutto. And the people she mentioned this to were surprised that she's cursing her own son. But because he ill-treated her. So Bhutto had that inferiority complex. So he tried to be even more anti-Hindu, anti-India than, let's say, a Punjabi would. Same thing with Benazir. If you remember in 1989, when the Kashmir issue started, she went up to Muzaffarabad and she made this horrible gesture of Jag Jag Mo Mo Han Han, as if to chop up Jagmohan into a salami slice. And if I can link this up to the present, Bilawal Bhutto's outburst in the UN is again trying to prove back home that he is a staunch anti-Indian person because they have this insecurity within themselves. This is one point that in the debates, people have speculated why he said that. But this is one thing to show to the Pakistanis that he is anti-India despite his Hindu origins. Now, Nawaz Sharif or any Punjabi politician doesn't have the need to say that or to show that they are anti-Indian. But the Bhuttos especially have this huge inferiority complex. And therefore, I doubt if they can ever be friends or friendly or even maintain normal relations with India because of this.
Yes, indeed. Next question, please. Chaitanya Takli again. Is it true that the majority of Soviet soldiers fighting Afghans were Uzbeks, Tajiks, and Kazakhs, and that went against the Soviets?
This was there in the beginning, when the Soviets came in 89, a large number of their troops were from their then Muslim republics. But very soon they realized that because they were fraternizing with the Tajiks, Uzbeks, and Hazaras who were in Afghanistan, it led to a lot of suspicion and mutual problems within the Red Army. So then they were repatriated and replaced by Russian soldiers. But initially, yes, they were from the Muslim republics.
Rajesh Singh wants to know Karachi is virtually a Pashtun township. How would that impact security within Pakistan into the larger South Asian context?
You see, Karachi is a 5 million, the largest Pashtun city in the world is Karachi. But Karachi has got a population of about 16 million, some people say 20 million. So they are not a majority, it's not a Pashtun township. There are certain areas, for example, like Malir and other places, which have a strong Pashtun population. But they are not, Karachi itself is Muhajirs, have Baloch, also have Sindhis. So it's a complex megapolis. Now, how would that impact security within Pakistan? And no, I don't think so. I think Pashtun is a more criminal infested area, and the crime is far more crucial or critical portion. Plus, it is awash with weapons and ammunition. So that is it. At one time, when the Muhajirs dominated, the Muhajirs had a free run on the place. But then Altaf Hussain ran into problems, went off to London, and the Muhajirs are now without a strong leadership, and which the PPP and the PTI are trying to reclaim for themselves in terms of vote banks. So in the last election, I think the PTI made several inroads.
Yes, indeed. And that brings us to a close. Last question here. I thought it was done. Mandar Kanik wants to know, what does the anti-Talib alliance have as strategy for the future? I touched upon this in the Panchsheel Valley and so on. Go
Yeah.
ahead, sir.
So right now it will be just trying to rebuild their power. Whether it is in Badakhshan, whether it is in Panchsheel, whether it is in some of the other provinces. Right now they are not a force that has a momentum or of a critical mass. They will also be looking for international support, like the Northern Alliance at one time was being supported by Iran, Russia, and also by India. Right now, they don't have that kind of support. So they will themselves have to show that they have the wherewithal and the potential. They'll have to organize, come up with a leadership plan, come up with a manifesto, what exactly they want to do, what they're trying to prove. And therefore, it'll take time. See, we are in a hurry that things should get done, tuck, tuck, tuck. Afghan time is very, very different. You have to accept that Afghan time moves slowly and they do things in their own time, but they don't forget.
Wow, what a session, Tilakji. I would like all the viewers, we have just put up the book here. This is available,
Yes.
I think, in Amazon. The link
Yes,
is
it
available
is.
in the description section. You can go and click on that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And I wish you all the best, Tilakji, in this book. And I would like to invite you back for one time in history where I think the Americans really got it wrong. Two times they got it wrong. One was, when Charlie Wilson funded some of the fight back by the Afghans against the occupying Russian forces. And then the United States just kind of abandoned the effort that they had started, like building schools and educational infrastructure and so on. And that again created that vacuum where the Taliban came in. So that 10 years that led to Taliban, and then years after that, in the 2001, especially how the Americans allowed Osama bin Laden to slip through their fingers in Tora Bora and that Kunduz airlift. I really, really want to understand from you, because America, they kind of, they throw a carpet over it. They don't like to talk about this. And I'd like our viewers to know. We want to show the truth. That was a very nasty piece of work that the Americans did, that
Yes.
they didn't finish it off. They should have finished off Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora caves. They didn't go in. They said the local leaders are going to. It's a mess. So I'm hoping that, sir, whenever you have the time and maybe a couple of weeks from now, we can go back and look at this. If we don't understand our history, we are doomed to repeat it. Like you have, I too have this concern that we'll have a whole slew of refugees from, like, especially if the rivers are drying up. That is really, really bad. You can't, people have to have a way to survive. I mean, look at how India has. See, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just also mention that some other things that the Americans don't want to be known. Who prepared this syllabus for the madrasas that was set up when the Soviet time, when the refugees came? It was the University of Nebraska. They prepared with documents, and what the documents were like. 2 Kalashnikovs plus 2 Kalashnikovs is equal to 4 Kalashnikovs. 1 dead Russian plus 3 dead Russians is. This was taught to schools to motivate them to fight against the Soviets. Now you can imagine that kind of poison steeped into young people, which will have an impact for 20 years.
I'd love for you to share with me that link, sir, because I do, put some of these data into the hands of the current congressmen and women and senators. PGurus is watched by everyone because we kind of tend to take the centrist line. There are not many sites that take that centrist line where we are showing the mirror to both sides. So I'd love for you to perhaps share with me, and I'd like to go through that and draw the attention, because US is now undoing some of the mistakes.
Yes.
Many people, for example,
I hope this congressional committee that has been set up will actually, it's a bipartisan committee, which will start meeting, I think, from 2023, early next year, will actually look into all aspects, not only confined to this 20 years, but go back to 1979. You mentioned Charlie Wilson, and you mentioned how the US abandoned it. You need to have a full reconciliation or truth and reconciliation thing of what actually went wrong and what lessons the US should draw for this for the future, because Afghanistan is not going away. The problem of Afghanistan is not going away, and you have to have the right kind of prescriptions.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. Again, viewers, thank you so much for your participation. We know there are better things to look at. Of course, Argentina appears to be winning quite easily right at this point. And like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And please don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for having me. All the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.